Doug, part three,
Part three.
French polishing as pertaining to repair and restoration. Overlooked subject, and thank you for doing this again. I wanted to take a second. So these guys gave you some coffee, right? They dropped it by your shop, right?
Oh yeah, I got enough coffee to caffeinate a small European country.
Okay, yeah, Acoustic Coffee Company. Look at their stuff. They're providing all my guests with coffee now. So if you support them, you support uh, people that I have on getting free coffee, which is a pretty good deal. So, and I get some free coffee too, which is also a pretty good deal. So, are you ready to go?
Yeah.
All right. Without further ado, part three of Doug Proper and his magic, his magic pad. All right.
So last time we were, I don't know if you want to pin um, the other.
Just call out the cameras that you want to Ted, and he'll do them.
Don't turn it. So the last time we were together, we French polished this guitar, the face of it, and I finished the other half of it, or the other 3/4 of it. Since, just to show you, how life is looking once it's done. This is just with the shellac mix that we've talked about in the past. I don't know if I'm getting too far away from this. I'll move that over so you can hear me. So I just wanted to quickly show this thing off and bring up a couple of things that I may have forgotten. Brian Bodigheimer, am I pronouncing that right, Brian?
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay. Every time I say your name, I feel like I'm adding a syllable for some reason, and I don't want to. I pronounce it wrong. But you had brought up very astutely last time when we chatted a little bit after the last time that I'd spent a lot of time talking about the importance of oils during French polishing as it related to their effect of drying oils versus non-drying oils and so forth and so such. And I, as you pointed out to me, I neglected to point out, generally speaking, while it's extremely important and it has a dramatic effect on your French polishing, which the drying oils is one of the reasons why this looks pretty much like lacquer, is I neglected to mention that you can overdo it with oil, and the use of oil, while it's very important and dramatic in the results, is actually minuscule in terms of its how much you're using as compared to, say, the shellac. So I pointed out that I was using, a dropper to drop onto the pad, 1 or 2 drops at a time every time I applied oil when I wanted to be in the mix, whether it be a drying oil like walnut oil or what have you. But I thought it was worth mentioning, especially since Brian had brought that up, that it's the amount you're using is important as well. You don't want to overdo it with the oil because you can wind up with a little bit of a sludgy mess. But this is what a finish looks like after only about, maybe an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes of total French polishing. That's the top. This is what you saw us French polish last time. This is the back. I don't do, a lot of people talk about flashing off while French polishing. I don't flash after it's done with alcohol or anything like that. I do that part while I'm French polishing. I'll increase the amount of alcohol in my pad as I'm buffing up the finish, as I'm getting satisfied with where it's at. So this is only after about a week of just sitting there doing nothing. since Sharon and I were away this week. And the final step to applying a finish, and I'll only spend a couple of minutes on this because I want to get to doing the repairs. But the final step to applying the finish is cleaning it up. I use a little bit of plastic polish. You can use Novus, you can use McGuire's. I think Dumac has one that they sell. What I'll typically do, if I really want to get a high shine going on, I'll just make a little pad similar to a polishing pad just out of those blue paper towels. And I'll just put an amount right on here. And I'll just start rubbing it on as if I'm French polishing. And you rub hard. This will help you, remove. There'll be some oils after the non-drying oils. There'll be some oils that want to rise to the surface. This will help get rid of that, any of the fingerprints, any smudges, or anything like that. You rub hard, you rub fast. And you can get a pretty high shine, even beyond what just a French polish looks like. And this is just a great way to dress up the finish, give it a good high shine. That's what you're going for. It's also a good way with a French finish that's already been French polished. If you don't feel you need to add more shellac to dress up the finish, to really kind of bring it back if the customer wants it a little bit shinier later. And that's a good, solid, shiny finish, if there ever was one. So it's hard, thanks to the drying oils and the Sanderac. It'll withstand quite an amount of abuse. So that's one of the reasons why I do a lot of that on guitars rather than spray finish, just because it's quicker, it's faster, the guitar gets done and out of the shop, and it's a good alternative to a lot of circumstances where you wouldn't necessarily want to spray. So what I'd like to do for most of today, and I'm going to rely on you, Ian, to keep me yapping while I'm doing this, is I want to spend some time going through a series of different kinds of repairs that I would use French polishing as part of the repair. Because we did the how to put finish on a guitar last time, and there's really not much more to that than we discussed. And I didn't think it was worth just seeing me polish more shellac onto guitars. But I would like to go through a bunch of scenarios where I do use it on a day-to-day basis to get me through a series of repairs. And I'm going to try to get through them as fast as I can. And in many of the cases, I'm probably not even going to complete them, but I'll try to, demonstrate to the point where it's convincing. So here we have a guitar. This is the second guitar. This, by the way, that puppy there, that was, I think, Aaron's first guitar that he built, or first archtop that he built. This is a more recent one that Aaron has built, and that suffered some
breakage.
It's a beautiful guitar. Got beautiful myrtle wood. Here's the new top that he had to replace. But it had fallen and it suffered an accident pretty much close to when he was done building it. And the side had cracked from here. I think you can see that all the way up. All the way up over here. and ended up, I believe, right up about here, not farther. It may have actually been a little bit farther, but here's where I can see it all the way up to. So we had a crack that pretty much opened up the whole side of the guitar. And while talking to Aaron about this recently, as he was recompleting the guitar, he was lamenting the fact that he was going to have to put a kind of a deep dark finish over it to hide this cross grain crack that he found, objectionable in terms of what it looked like. And I suggested it wasn't necessary to do that because it's the kind of guitar that, I think most would agree that has a good amount of wood, that a clear finish is probably preferable. So I'm going to try to do this in such a way where I can keep the camera between me and the guitar, provided it doesn't prevent me from seeing what's going on there. So cross-grain cracks are a pain in the butt because they stand out dramatically after a repair, because we can see them crossing the grain. That's why we call them cross-grain cracks. I try to get them to be, I don't necessarily try to make them disappear as much as I try to get them to look less conspicuous. And I do use a bit of French polishing magic to do this. The first step for me, and if you remember, I've said it before, that to me, a finished repair or a touch-up repair is always going to look better under finish than it does on top of finish. I'm going to move that aside a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. So my first step as part of the repair is going to be to open this crack a little bit, because I want a surface that I can paint into and fill with shellac. I'm not going to try to do the whole thing at once. I'll just go in steps and stages. I can feel of that. Should this up a little bit. So just with a scalpel, I'm going to try to get right into the line that I'm trying to make less conspicuous. And then the hopes that I'm going to be able to try to hide the tree in the forest, we're going to try to get that. I've got it from about here to about up to here. So if you want to include pinned the table, so you can see what we're doing there. I'm going to use the same shellac that I used to French polish, peanut or platinum blonde or super blonde or whatever the vendor wants to call it. I'm going to put a little bit, a couple of pallets. A little bit of alcohol. Try brushes in. So for practice like this, I'll probably use a multiple of different mediums to try to get the job done. My first of which would be the shellac with what I guess used to be called furniture powders. pigments and tints. It's a combination of which there are some dyes, some pigments. Because we need to hide some stuff here. And I'll brush a little bit. For this, I'm going to try a little bit of antique white pigment in here, which looks a little more flesh tone than anything else. So I'm dripping shellac all over the place. Start there with a little bit of white pigment nearby. Not that too much green. I can get a better satisfactory white.
Doug, is your white turning a little pink?
Well, the off white is naturally a little bit pink. This my pure white has a little bit too much contaminants in it.
Ah,
I want to just get rid of that altogether.
that's just your.
That's just transfer of color from one place to another. It should have been. So let me try. A little bit of white. The brush that I was using, red last time.
Doug, what kind of brush is that?
This is, I have no idea. Both Royal and Lang, something like that.
Yeah,
I'm a little bit of a heathen when it comes to brushes because I just buy what's cheap.
I do too. They don't last long in my shop.
I'm driving by see, that's the color I'm looking for there. This one here, a little bit pale. See the brush, the last brush I picked up had a little bit of red in it. So when I'm passing by a Michael's or something like that, I will typically, you know, or if I'm going to it for any other reason, I'll grab a few packages of those $5 for like 50 brushes in it or something like that. So I'm going to pick up some color. I'm going to come over to where I've abraded the guitar, where I've cut into the. I'm going to paint, and it's going to be bright. I'm going to try to wipe it off so that I'm in the crack.
How wet is your brush at this point? You pretty wet?
It's pretty dry.
So just to reiterate, you went in with your knife and made a trough for that to go into, correct?
Yes, and I'm rubbing my finger along the top of it to try to get my pigment to stay in the crack and not necessarily around it.
That's good stuff. I think my instinct would just be paint right over the top of it and try to go long over the grain lines. But I like this. I like this move a lot.
You can see that even as I'm wiping away what's on the surface, my line is getting fainter as I'm going. And this gives me the benefit of being able to hide what's here. And you can even see is the problem with pigments is that when you move to the side, generally speaking, they tend, they could look great from here, but as you move to the side, they scream out at you. So this move of putting pigment down into the crack, or at least the surface of the crack, is kind of a nice move that you don't get much in the way of a pigment, reflecting light poorly. And back to the concept of a finish, repair will always look better under finish than on it. That's what we're trying to do here. And you can see this is a little white for my tastes. So I'm going to add probably a little bit of raw sienna, which might be a little yellow for my tastes.
Doug, what part of the wood are you looking at for the color on here? What's the
I'm trying to look at the widest part in between the grain lines here. So if I zoom this in a little bit,
also, how did you zoom?
I just pinched the phone like
Okay.
so I'm trying to get here. I'm trying to be that whitish looking tan in between everything. I'm not trying to make this disappear. I want to make it inconspicuous. I'm literally working color into that crevice. Now I'm going to zoom back out a little bit, because if I start to get satisfied with the color, which I kind of am here, it's much less conspicuous than it was because the rest of it looked like this. Here, I'm starting to like what I see in terms of color. So now I want to lock in the color, and I'm going to use a little bit of French polishing to get myself to where I want to be. I pulled out a pen before.
we talk about that locking in the color just a little bit?
Sure.
What do you what do you what's your
Well,
thought process on
trying,
that?
what I'm trying to do here is I want to take what I have here, and I want to, for lack of a better description, I want to lock in my progress so far, and also I want to start to see what it's going to start to look like under finish. I think I only cut it up to about here. So let me see if I move a little bit further north on this. When I say lock in color, it's, it's, I guess it's the equivalent of when you're spraying, when you're doing a touch up and you say, oh, I like what I see there. I want to kind of get it to pause where it is and then make a decision as to whether or not I need to add this, detract from that, add a little bit of color, or whether or not it's time to start painting in grain lines.
Do you feel like you'd use the same technique even if it wasn't going cross grain? Like, would you use this with a with grain
Oh, sure.
crack?
Absolutely. But like the hardest to me, the reason why I want to show this was the hardest thing to do is to try to get rid of a cross grain crack when you're doing a repair, because those are the telltale signs that the repair is taking place. That's looking a little white to me, so I want to scrape a little bit of that off.
Speaking of removal, if you've got it down in the crack, like, is your only recourse if you don't like what you have down there to pull it back out with a knife, or do you have techniques for getting that back out if you need to take another swipe at it?
Oh, well, if you really wanted to get rid of it completely, you would just wet your brush with alcohol and then start all over. You would just wipe everything with alcohol, and alcohol will pull all of that out.
Is the wood surrounding this, is it bare at this point?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
This is, this would be down in the bare. It would work with a finish on it as well. You would just have to make sure that you're going light enough to. And grab a better brush. There we go. You would need to. If I wetted a clean brush with alcohol and just did that, you can see the crack just kind of come back. And it's right there, that section there. It's back. So, if I go back to putting the color on, it's a little white, but I'll keep it a little white just to show you. I'll typically come by with some kind of dental tool, which everybody knows I have an abundance of, and I will draw it back. So I'm taking it off the surface, but it's still down.
Grace is curious. There isn't a secondary goal of filling the trough as well, right? Like,
I'm not worried about filling the trough at this point.
okay.
So getting my color right, because you're going to see in a second, and through the course of a bunch of different repairs today, that shellac has this kind of, for lack of a better word, while you're polishing on finish, this miraculous property or characteristic that it fills voids, divots, dings, scratches, and whatnot. I like what I'm seeing there. It's a little white. I might decide to add a little color.
It's looking really good on this end. Scott, yes, Doug did use the number 10 McGuire's, which is a plastic polish.
Mhm.
Doug, do you ever have to like lightly wet sand your French polish with 2000 or anything like that? Do you ever?
I
You
don't. That's to me, that's where pumice stone comes in.
okay.
As I'm doing that salt shaker move of
Yeah.
putting that on and then sanding with it, it acts as an abrasive to level off my area. There have been times where if I'm in a hurry and I don't, I'm, trying to rush through to the end result of a finish, I'll, grab a little, cut of paper, put it on a felt block, and sand out some objectionable things if I want to. Or there are other times where I'm trying to affect a build very quickly that is building in to fill some voids and other places where it's getting too tall. I'll just grab a little sandpaper to knock it off. But most of the time, it's just with pumice stone. So here, what I'll do is I'm going to take a pad just like we made last time, except instead of charging it, remember last time we charged the pad with finish and alcohol first in order to get the pad ready. I'm going to use a pad in the reverse. What I want in this case is I want a dry pad that I can feed. Camera. That I could feed with shellac. But I want the dry pad to really kind of suck in most of the shellac, so it leaves me with a surface that I can come over to the guitar and just wipe. Now I'm going to see what the result of what I was saying was going on too white. But this also locks in a little bit of color. Now I can come back with my brush and say, okay, now I know what I need to do. I want to pull the different colors. So I'll use a little bit of that raw sienna. Red sienna. These are all pigments that I can start messing with dyes here as well. And a little bit of medium brown or a dark brown. I want to about red. So I put that all there. Really dilute the brown. First grab a little bit, tiny bit of this. And then you just get used to seeing what.
So is there still a divot that you're painting into there, or is that?
I feel a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So you're not proud of the surface of the crack at this point.
No, I might be around the sides of it here, but then as I then charge my pad a little bit of shellac, just wipe it on,
Mhm.
my color coming down a bit,
Yeah.
and I can get what colors. I'm going to grab a little bit of brown dye.
That's looking pretty tight.
Closer, be where I want to be.
That's what the kids say, by the way.
So I've got a brown here that I want to get off my brush and use just a touch of it, very diluted. And
Are you giving it streaks at this point, or are you still trying to dial in the base coat?
just trying to dial in my base of the crack.
Okay.
I want to get this, like I said, light, so I have a canvas to paint on.
Uh-huh.
You just have to dip into the fresh shellac to reactivate your color, what you're looking for. too orange for me. By the way, if you ever
Oh,
want to know what a color is going to look like before you put it on a guitar,
uh,
using a glass slide will let you do that as well.
that's
So
a
you
good move.
do yellow there. I'm not going to do that.
Where are you getting them glass slides from?
I probably bought them from Amazon ages ago. You buy a box of like 200 of them, and
Used to be I had to go to the microscope store. Not every town had one of those.
so here,
Mark Adams just says he uses acetate. That's a pretty good move. I flip packing tape. I stick packing tape to itself sometimes and use that as mask slash.
the nice thing about shellac is it dries pretty quick. So I can get a look, a little bit more, just a quick swipe of finish, and that'll dry pretty quickly. And I'll be able to see what it's starting to look like underneath that. So my crack is beginning to disappear underneath all of that. Color, what I want to see around it.
So are you fudging on either side of the crack a little bit?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a blended color that looks like the color behind what's there. You see the difference of what was here and what's here. I don't want to get too wet with it. I don't want to get too fuzzy with it. But just one swipe and let it dry, kind of diffuse that crack. And the more we French polish over it when it's done, the more hidden it'll be, because it's French polish when you're actually putting a lot of finish on, has kind of a filtering effect. At least I find.
Doug, where are your pigments from again?
Well, these this kit was from I can't remember where. This is like 30 some odd years old. The first mistake I ever made was putting it in a tray where all of the colors were together, because the cross contamination is dramatic. So you have to really be careful
Yeah.
out of there. I bought the full kit of what I guess Blendall powders is now what they're calling, what Mohawk has. And that's I guess a very similar product to this.
It looks very similar. I
You know,
wouldn't. It may be one of those things like Milligan and Higgins hide glue, where there's like probably only a handful of people making powdered pigments, and Mohawk might be getting theirs from wherever this supplier got theirs from.
And if I wind up going a little too light, that's fine because I can always get darker on top of that. But I want a little bit of translucency to my shellac or to my pigment because I don't want it to stand out dramatically from different angles. I don't want it to be too, but I think that's about where I kind of like it or where I'm going to want it to sit. I might pull a little bit off of that just by taking my scalpel and doing a little bit of that.
So the scalpel is pulling off shellac or color?
And whatever's there, and I can
Uh,
put some finish over the top of it. I don't want to get too wet because I really don't want to dissolve what's underneath it. That's why I keep charging a pad that was originally dry because most of the shellac is just getting sucked into here. So the amount that I put on is much less. If it begins to drag a little bit, I know it's getting a little bit wet and it is beginning to drag a little bit. So now I've got an area where I'm not going to do the whole thing. We're not going to go up to the whole crack today. But so I've got from here to here well hidden. And then if I want to start painting in some grain lines or pushing in some grain lines, we can do it with a number of products.
yeah. So your pad dragging, like, would there be a point at which you're like, okay, this is done for today, or would you just peel everything back off and start over?
No. If my pad's dragging, that tells me that this area is still wet.
Yeah.
So I don't want it to get too wet. Let me pull back a little bit. I don't want to get this to get too wet where I start getting it wet enough to start pulling my color off.
Yeah.
My goal is to have the finish, and you can see if I go next to it, the finish is starting to get darker.
Yeah.
Get darker. My goal is to have the finish cover what's there, dry so it locks it in, and I'll let it sit just a few minutes. And once it starts feeling like it's no longer dragging, I can put a little bit more finish on, lock it on, and I'm good to go.
I guess what I was trying to get to though is it possible to get it wet enough to where it's not like if somebody was just starting out, could they futz with this and futz with this and futz with this to the point where it was like so damp that they really just needed to?
Yeah, you could get it too wet, but you'll know it's too wet when you do this, and everything you just did comes off on
Just
here.
pulls right off on there.
It'll rather than turning into a mess, you'll just defeat your own purpose.
Yeah. So what
Wipe on some finish there, it gets a little darker.
if
and you can see that's still there.
if a person was to do that, just give it time and
Just give it a few minutes, and you know you'll be able to tell rubbing your hands over it if it stops feeling sticky. Like over here, this is actually feeling pretty smooth now. So over here, it's actually dry. Here, where I just wiped, it's still a little sticky. And I'm not worried about contaminating my shellac by touching it. This, as we know, is a graining pen. You can do it with. I don't like when I'm doing this kind of work. You could take some pigments and some dyes, drop them in, some other wells, and start painting in grain lines. I try to avoid that in this circumstance because I don't want to keep putting shellac on top of shellac on top of shellac, because then I wind up with a little bit of a muddy mess. So I'll come in with a graining pen. This is from, I guess this is from Mohawk too. So I'll come in here and I'll start. This is an oak, so it's a light color. I'll start putting that there, and it'll add the benefit of adding a little bit of that color that I'm missing.
talk about your finger move there for a sec.
I'm dragging, I'm putting a dimple, like some dots,
Uh-huh.
and I'm dragging them, and that will wind up.
Oh, that looks nice.
That'll
So
wind up.
that's a dye pen, or is that a?
This is a dye pen. This is what they call traditionally a graining pen.
Is that got shellac in it, or does it have some other binder?
This is just ink. I think that's all it is. I don't think it's a finish base. I don't think it's solvent base. I think it's just ink. The
Is it biting into the shellac there, or is it
yeah, it's
okay?
it's there.
Okay.
They come in let me see. They come in light oak, black, dark brown, and black, light oak, dark brown, and I think some people are medium brown. So we can you can see here. If you want to look at the difference in the colors, here is a medium brown. That wouldn't actually be bad for this guitar. Dark brown would probably be much too dark for this guitar. Since I'm sitting on shellac right now, it is biting into the shellac. We were going to look at light oak. Then, of course, black, what black would look like. Probably terrible. So that could wind up looking like a fuzzy mess.
But you do have some pretty dark stuff on the left
You
side.
do. You do. I might take I might just take a micro mesh pen, a micro mesh pad, and get rid of that. Right through the shellac.
Very nice.
At this point, to me, this is feeling quite dry. I can even do this to see how my grain lines look.
You don't have any problem with the shellac pulling those grain lines around there with the Mohawk graining pens?
This stuff is surprisingly color fast.
I know I've used the pigment pens before, those micron pens, and it does seem like it takes a little bit of, like, maybe you'd want to go back and like take an airbrush and just give it a little something to tack it down.
Yeah,
but that looks like it's responding really well to sticking to the shellac and then letting you wipe back over it.
yeah, that's not doing bad. It's starting to look a little bit orangey to me. So I might come off of that, get a little bit darker. Give myself a couple of dark spots.
Ted Bergstrand noted that that's how they made the wood bar at the Hard Rock Cafe.
Oh, really? By just painting on it?
Yeah, I think they fake smudgy grains. I did that when I had my shop. I couldn't figure out what I was going to do for the trim. I had painted the shop, and then I kept, so I was like, okay, it's a guitar store, so let's have wood. And the wood that I bought looked terrible, so then I wound up just painting over it and paint fake grain line on all my trim, which was just absurd. I don't know what I was thinking. That looks really nice.
Got some dark stuff happening over here that I can kind of draw over. If I don't like what I'm seeing, I can actually just take my pad, get a little bit wet on it, and it kind of pulls it through and makes for less grain lines. Let it dry a little bit.
So you're changing the intensity of the look with your pad as well.
Yeah, if I decide I'm getting too heavy, for example, and I'll do it somewhere where the crack isn't. Like, let's say I accidentally decide black was a good idea, and I start doing all sorts of stuff here.
Aaron, are you watching this?
Oh yeah, I'm watching.
Uh-oh.
I start doing that.
I think he just wrote what is
It's
what is
done.
that,
It's
Doug?
done. I'll finish all over it. Done.
You can take a pretty wet pad and get rid of everything you did if you don't like what you see.
Doug's gonna finish this whole thing and then erase it, so I have to do it.
That's fair. Doug, are you getting color on your pad? Is pad contamination something to be concerned about, or is it subtle?
Yeah, I just did because of the black.
Mhm.
So at this point, I would switch to a different pad. And I might even switch to a different pad right now anyway, because my pad is starting to pull in quite a bit of shellac, and I don't want it to be putting too much on right now. I don't want it shellac to be going on too wet. I want it to be going on light enough that it locks in what I have. Go back just a little bit. And just acts as a sealer for whatever work I've done up to that point. Now, that's not looking too bad to my eyes. I suppose if I were, I could come up here, and I have to go up here anyway to get rid of this line. But, the comparison between here and here is pretty dramatic with not a lot of work.
Yeah, Brian Bodegeheimer just said it also pays to give your eyes a break during touch-up. It looks pretty good to us. If it looks pretty good to us, it'll be near invisible to non-loose, which pretty good to think about before you start losing track of time. And
It's
then,
easy to obsess over a spot.
yeah, it is. And you wonder why the sun went down and you're broke all the time.
I would probably stop here, and then I would move up to here to this part of the crack and start, getting, you also notice that it's beginning to take a shine. So some of that is going to interfere with your being able to see what's there. So I'll dress it down with just a little bit of a sanding stick or micro mesh. And then I'll come up here and I'll start working my way this way with the same way I did from here to here, try to just make that go away a little bit more. You can, if I wanted to. At this point, I also might start going with your methodology of coming in with a brush and getting myself a few more trees in the forest, so to speak, this way, the brush.
Yeah.
Just a wet enough surface that I can start to hide that crack, a little bit more. And from here to here, you wouldn't even know it happened. From here up, I still have a little bit of work to do, and from here to here, obviously, is unfinished.
Yeah.
So that to me is, in a nutshell, how you use French polishing to hide a cross-grain crack. The more work you do, and as you continue to polish on, finish, in between your stippling and your grain lines, the finish gets thicker and thicker. And then at some point, you're just at a point where you're just wiping on finish and keeping everything covered. And then you start building clear on top of that, and you wind up with something that winds up looking like not even a repair. It's at least insignificant enough or inconspicuous enough that it's not going to draw somebody's attention saying, "Oh, this is a great guitar. What happened here?" And it saves Aaron from having to make this a black guitar or a dark sunburst or something like that, so he can have a good clean finish on the guitar. And this is inconspicuous at best or worst.
Well, I think this is a real good move.
So that's scenario one, where I would use French polishing in finish. And I do that a lot. I'll do that on peg head breaks. I'll do that on cracks like this in the body. I'll do that on splint repairs in a top, where if you're looking to get rid of those cross grain, where the splint ends and has that cross grain line from where your splint is to where the guitar is. If you're doing it with shellac and furniture powders as opposed to liquid pigments, even if you look at this from the side, it doesn't stand out the way pigments normally do. They stand out like a neon sign. This is much more subtle because the pigment is diffused in the shellac.
It's also one thing I would say too is if it's in a crack, like when you're looking at it on the side, I mean, like you would have a hard time just seeing a crack from the side too. So
That's true.
that's one of the reasons why I think going deep rather than going on the surface is a real winner. Are your pigments? Mark is asking, what kind of pigments are you using? Uh, water or spirit? I mean, you're mixing them into
I'm mixing it.
alcohol, so it's spirit. But are those universal pigments? Do you think will they mix into water as well?
If my memory serves, they were soluble in, I believe, almost any. Um, let me try.
Also, Grace had an ethical question for, I'm guessing, Aaron. Are you gonna disclose this crack when you go to sell it?
I it I'm most likely going to end up keeping this guitar because I've had the fortunately good problem of having sold every guitar that I've made so far and not having any guitars to show people when they asked. So this is a good guitar to keep around and just, chalk it up to, well, I didn't sell it because there's a crack. If someone offers it really wants to buy it, I'll disclose the crack, but I'm most likely just going to keep it around.
Yeah,
Carl,
it would be.
I also thoroughly from the inside, because I replaced the top too. I didn't initially have side linings in the guitar. So when I put a new top on, I said, well, of course I'm going to put side linings in every guitar from now on, because this crack probably would have stopped after 3 inches if it weren't for not having side linings.
Did it clamshell on you? Yeah.
So, I mean, the crack went all the way from the waist to the butt of the guitar. If there were side linings to have stopped it, then that probably wouldn't have been such a big deal. So I put side linings in when I replaced the top. So it's thoroughly cleated now.
Carl's wanting to know the order number on those pens too. If
The pens are from, I think they're from Mohawk. They used to be Benlin, I guess.
Balin, yeah.
Benlin is now owned by Mohawk.
Those are like about a fine Sharpie tip, right? Like they're about like.
It's ridiculous fine.
That's good news. Yeah.
In terms of the pinpoint of the pen. So they're from Balin, black. There's the number 05.
Yeah.
Dark brown, 0401. We're starting to sense a pattern. Light oak, 0101. I'm guessing there's a 0301 or 0201. Medium brown, 0301. So by looking at it, 0101, 0301, 0401, and 0501, I'm guessing I'm missing an 0201, or it might be over in my pen rack over there.
Robin, those brush tip graining pens, I think, are like, I don't know. The tips on those seem very big to me. I could never make those work. Are you talking about like the chisel tip ones?
Yeah, I just compared the two. I'm looking at the Mohawk website now.
Are you talking about these here?
Yeah.
These are great. I love these.
Do you find those ones easier to use, or do you find the fine Sharpie tip style better?
If I'm drawing grain lines, I'm definitely gonna like this better.
Yeah.
Because they're much finer and they're much easier to control. I find that if I grab.
Are you talking about the ones where you press the tip into the pen to charge it?
These are called
brush tip markers.
Markers, and they are from Mohawk.
Yeah.
They come in a huge variety of color, and these are great. In fact, this color would probably work really well if I wanted to try to.
Oh, maybe I haven't seen that. So is that an actual like brush on the tip of that, like a paintbrush?
The brush tip.
Huh.
It's designed so in theory you would draw grain lines, but its tip is too flexible, and by the time the finish starts coming off of it, it winds up looking kind of muddy.
Yeah.
We use those at PRS all the time for touch-up work, but it's usually like not for graining stuff, like Doug said, like it's bigger areas to color.
Yeah.
So here, I'm going to pull that what I just did off, because I'm gonna get a very wet pad, pull that off. If I was using these for this guitar, I would probably use it for the purposes of getting a little bit of color. Like if I'm looking at the guitar, like right here, I got a little bit of an area where there's a little white for my taste. And I'll come in there and get it to be a little bit of a different color.
Are any of these pens that you're using in jeopardy of getting locked up if you get them on shellac that's too damp? Like, can you get shellac onto your tip and lock it down?
No. You would just dip the tip into a little bit of alcohol and you're perfect.
Okay.
So that's what I like these pens for. If I'm trying to change the color of something, you know, in a wider area, I'll just come through and do lots of that.
Is
So
that
if I wanted to get
is that bristles on the tip of that, or is it like a foam?
I think it's a foam.
Okay,
There's no bristles there. I don't know if you can see that.
but it's got some nice action there. It's
It
like,
does have nice. It's got a nice brush to it.
so you can go thin and
So if I wanted to take this dark line here and kind of just extend that up through the crack, so I can kind of get that faux thing happening that way.
yeah.
Kind of throw the eye away from that. I can do that, and then just get a little bit of shellac on there just to lock that in a little bit. So that's what these pens are great for. They're great for color. The colors that they come in are a wild variety of colors. They come in great for doing little quick touch-ups if I don't feel like mixing a lot of dyes into whatever medium. If I'm trying to get through a touch-up super quick, right for that. So any more questions on this kind of repair? Because I think I'd like to move to the next one.
Yeah, do what you feel, man. It's your...
So next one, if you remember, we talked
Hi,
about
Sharon.
this last time. Remember this guitar we talked about last time that you were curious about?
Yeah. We got all this crazy.
Yeah, we got
Is that like overspray that's checked, or is that?
just lacquer. That's just from water damage, and it's flaking up like mad. It's very fragile. I can pick it up very easily. The entire guitar was I pulled back. That entire guitar was covered in it. I've already removed all of this from the rest of the guitar. I stopped here because the experience of doing it was wonderfully cathartic, and I thought it would be really good to share. So let me move the guitar over to the other bench. Here. So
All I can see is Robin's forehead, and I'm like, "Do you need a booster seat, buddy? Are you sure you can see from down there?"
The seat's broken. Every time I put it up, it slowly creeps back down again. I just gave up.
I'm just so thoughtful. I was like, I wonder if he can see.
So you can see there how painful that looks. Most of us spend most of our careers in abject fear of using tape on a guitar, and for fear of the fact that it'll pull up somebody's finish. In this case, we're going to remove all of this. I already did so. You can see here how a lot of all of the pickled stuff is gone, or all of the flake stuff is gone. There still is a finish on it, and in some areas more than others.
Is that a seal coat, or what layer of the finish would you say you're at there?
That's probably top coat, or here, this is down at sealer coat or past.
Yeah.
Coat or color coat, I'm not sure which. There still is some finish on it. In some areas, there's more of a finish on it than others. But this is a circumstance where, looking at this overall guitar, when the customer dropped it off, they looked at we were talking about everything else it needed. This had a huge crack in the back. The back is going to get French polish as well. It had a crack running from stem to stern in the back, which has been repaired. All of the braces have been replaced, or actually half of them have been replaced. Half of them were just rattling in the guitar and just needed to be glued.
Who replaced the braces on that?
Come again?
Did you replace the braces on the back?
I did.
Holy moly.
That was all done through the F-holes and through the,
Uh-huh.
and that actually is thanks to Dan. I wouldn't have been able to do it without his little brace check.
Yeah, those are pretty sweet. The is this a 125 or 150?
It's I think it's a 125.
Okay.
Have to look up.
I don't know why I ask you that. I hate when people ask stuff like that.
Well, I'll go look it up then.
Yeah, I'm not a people look it up.
Who is it?
What year is it?
Morgan.
What year is that Gibby?
It's probably
I'm just
early 60s, I think. So here, we're going to French polish the back as well after I finish sealing the crack, but the crack is repaired, the braces are done. And when we were going over everything that the guitar needed in addition to frets and what have you, the customer kept looking at the top saying, is there something that could be done about this to make this look better? He says, it keeps peeling off and it was worse and worse as the years go by. And so I suggested we just French polish the face. It's not, I don't want the guitar to look new again. I want all of the checking that you can see in here to be there when it's done. So those check marks are still there, actually. They're still hanging on.
Doug, can we talk money for a second? Did you bid this project? If you don't want to say talk about money, that's totally fine too. I'm just curious what you bid this at.
I'll let you know as soon as Sharon brings it. It's been with us long enough that I don't remember what we're getting paid for.
Oh, I hate that. Do you remember what we talked about? I think you said $75.
It's a 125. You know what this is doing now?
Wow, not enough.
So the whole job is billing out just under $3,000.
Okay.
So here, what we want to do, we need to remove that first, before we start putting finish on it. And when I first started, I was coming by with a dental tool, very carefully working some of this stuff off. And I got the idea that that's why I stopped at a certain point, because I was having way too much fun, and I decided it was a good thing to share.
Hey Doug, is there any chance you could move your main computer a little closer so the mic can pick you up a little bit better?
Sure.
What is that? Some of that STUMAC low tack, or what is that?
This I got from Home Depot, I think.
Yeah.
I don't remember what they call it.
They make tape in yellow now?
Is that close enough? This is frog tape.
Oh yeah, frog tape set. It's for making the crisp lines on your accent wall, right?
Yeah. Go over there.
It may have some help in it chemically to get that finish off of there too.
I'm just using the sticky part of it.
I know, but they put some spicy spicy stuff in that tape adhesive for the edge lock stuff.
I was having way too much fun doing this. So that's why I said the one time in our careers visible.
That your heart didn't stop when it happens.
It's amazing these thoughts. Like for me, like I think I'm so tape adverse. I don't think there's any. I've had such bad luck with tape and finish. I don't know that this would have occurred to me just by virtue of being tape phobic. That looks really good.
Yeah, so this is pulling up what's bound to come up.
Mhm.
A little anecdote: when we were running a shop with multiple loops, very early on, we had an apprentice. We put a toe tag on each customer's guitar with the work order number and the customer's name, and we just stick it somewhere on the guitar that we can see it, so we're not wondering, whose guitar is this? Whose guitar is this? We had an apprentice who dutifully wrote down customer's name and the work order number, and then proceeded to take the piece of tape, and he taped right over the logo, the late 50s Fender Strat. And then when we went to pull out the tape, of course, the logo was then on the tape. So something to be cautious about.
When I was working in Santa Fe, we had a woman that was working behind the counter, and she'd sold like probably, I think about a $5,000 flamenco guitar, and the guy brought it up and put it on the counter, and she put the receipt pad right on top of it and started writing, and the guy wound up with a history of his transaction in the top of the guitar. Very difficult to explain.
I think
Oh,
that's
this is looking like a time lapse now.
Yeah. And so that's probably as much as I need to come off.
That looks really good. Is it my imagination, or are there a couple dark areas over there towards the apex? Yeah, in there. Is
Yeah,
that did somebody do some touch up on that before, or?
I don't know. I think that's just finish that's still
Oh,
on.
okay.
That's an area that there's a lot of finish still on. So you can see there's lots of craters, lots of crevices.
Yeah.
Those score lines from having checked. And so all of this, I'm not going to try to get all of that off before I start putting the finish back on the guitar. This, fortunately enough, will be under the pick guard, so I don't have to worry about that too much.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to draw it back a little bit. Now here's where French polishing comes in. Now we're going to start with, I'll get my fingers on. Hands. So here's a perfect job where a customer wanted to know if something can be done to make the guitar look better, short of spending a ton of money on refinishing. So I said, sure, we can do that. And I suggested French polishing as a result. And the first step was to get rid of all of that stuff that was getting ready to flake off. Then I'm going to use a medium-sized pad, about yay big. We found a little shellac. I'll use the same stuff we were using over at the table. Some super bond.
Doug, have you made any orders since Jerry's last visit? You've been shopping for any new ointments and preparations?
Since Jerry's last visit.
Yeah, Jerry.
Oh, yeah.
Jerry Lynn.
I'm really interested in getting some myrrh to
Mhm.
try that.
I'm keen on the aluminum hydroxide. That's got me interested.
Yeah, I was interested in that as well.
Myrrh.
On this. So now I'm just going to draw. Some of the alcohol from this. That's a little too cloudy.
Any idea what your kind of measurement on the difference between what finish is on there and the finish that you've taken off? You got maybe like two, 3 thousandths, or what's your ledge looking like?
Probably in that neighborhood.
Okay.
That really didn't concern me in terms of how much it'll only inform me in the sense that where there's less finish on there is obviously where I'll be spending more time.
Uh-huh.
Because shellac has a wonderful ability while you're French polishing, to kind of fill all the voids, level out all of the hills and valleys, and then after you've started to build a finish, coming back in with pumice stone to kind of level sand everything out as you're going, kind of does a lot of that work for you. Oh. Here, so you can see what I'm doing over here. I get my shellac, and I will load my syringe. Personally like to do.
Doug, the move of injecting your pad with the syringe, did you come up with that, or is that?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that.
Yeah, because the traditional way is to like soak your
you
soak your wadding, right?
Yeah, you soak the wadding, you close the pad. For me, that's way too much fumbling.
Yeah, and it takes forever to get a pad going the way that you want it. This seems much more controllable.
True, and in this circumstance, you're going to see how this really works to our advantage, because I'm going to load up my shellac first. Usually, I would charge with alcohol a little bit just to get the pad going. But here, I'm loading up with shellac. I want a good, decent amount of shellac in there.
Mark is asking about. I'm guessing, Mark, if you want to unmute and ask if I butcher this question, would you use a brush to fill in the missing bits in this situation? When I was taught to repair, used a Badger Bear hair soft brush. I think he's like thinking maybe you get a head start by brushing some shellac on first.
I don't generally do that, only because for my tastes, you wind up with having to deal with a lot of, you have to put on the stuff pretty wet, and then there's a longer drying time. For me,
Plus brush hairs and brush
hair,
strokes.
then I gotta clean the brush, and
Yeah.
yeah. And the whole idea of just slapping on. So now I've got a pretty charged pad. Where is my? Oh, here we go. So there. So it's a pretty charged pad. It's pretty wet. Before I start rubbing on, I'm going to move over to my alcohol, and I want to get this diluted a bit. So I'm going to put a fair amount of alcohol in the pad because I want a pretty wet, pretty hot pad. Because as I start wiping on, I want it to fill in, get all into all of the nooks and crannies, back to the guitar.
So you're adjusting the viscosity uh, with the alcohol a little bit too, like you're trying to get it to flow in.
And I want it to get into all the nooks and crannies. We'll pull back a little bit so we can see the whole guitar.
That looks nice.
And I want to get into all the nooks and crannies and get it to go underneath any areas of finish. Just fill all those little voids, slide up underneath everywhere that it can.
Alcohol is a little bit of a solvent for lacquer. Do you feel like you're moving lacquer around with your pad a little bit too, or is it mostly just putting the shellac on?
Well, it's a little hot, so you can even see some dirt that it's pulling off, because I didn't even bother cleaning the finish very much before I started pulling up because it was so fragile.
Yeah.
And now what I wanted to make sure first would happen is that any of those areas of wrinkled finish where it has that kind of amber look, that I was getting a good amount of diluted finish under. Now from here, I'm just going to start feeding my pad. And obviously, the more alcohol, that is, the more shellac we put on, will begin to dilute the alcohol content, and it'll become more shellac based.
Doug, can you talk a little bit about what's going on there with, it may be confusing for some people why you would inject shellac into it and then put shellac on the top of the pad.
Well, you want to charge the pad to make sure that there's plenty of material in the pad. The whole concept behind French polishing is that as you press on the pad, finish is coming out of the pad and of course onto whatever you're pushing the pad on. So as you're wiping on, I'm pressing down and it's squeezing out finish from the pad.
Okay.
Rather than open up the pad and pour more finish in it, you just feed the pad outwardly, and that gets more shellac on the surface of your pad and then soaks in a little bit more.
Okay. Brian says that alcohol is a latent solvent for lacquer. It can assist active solvents to dissolve. The solvent part is dissolving, and help control evaporation. This is a great approach. It will bite in a little bit, but not dissolve the lacquer. Yeah, like I don't think you'd want to get the lacquer so dissolved that you were really moving it into your French polish mixture. I don't know that I would trust it much after it reanimated and then congealed with shellac.
Yeah, so I'm wiping on finish at this point, and I'm starting to feel the pad get a little sticky. So at that point, I will reach for my, where is it?
You're leaving us hanging. It's killing me. I'm almost gonna say it.
What's that?
I'm almost gonna say it. Did you say it?
Say what?
Oil?
Oil?
Is that what you're
Oil?
putting on there?
Yeah. So we're gonna grab a little bit of mineral oil.
Mineral oil.
Yes.
Okay. I forgot. I thought you were a walnut oil guy. No, you're a mineral oil guy, right?
I'm
baby.
both.
Okay.
At this point, I don't want to start adding a drying oil to the finish because I want to get more shellac on than I do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to start adding a drying oil to my mix because I want to build as much as I can. I'm going to start using, in short order, a fair amount of pumice stone. And you'll see very often that I'll drop my pad onto this paper pad here because I don't want to put, after I've charged my pad, I don't want to put too wet a pad on because I don't want to slop on lacquer. I want to polish it on. Now on this guitar, most of our finish loss was up in this area here, down around the bottom part here, up around the upper F hole and controls over here, and the treble valve here. And we're just gonna keep putting finish on, and piling it on as thick as we can. A little bit of oil, just one drop of oil.
When you first started applying it, Doug, you sort of went from top to bottom, like
Yeah.
one direction. Is
This
there,
one-
before you, yeah,
Yeah, that's to create a surface, kind of an even surface of both that shellac and alcohol to kind of get into all of the nooks and crannies. And
Okay.
this gives your polishing or your shellac something to stick to.
okay, thanks.
Initially, at this point, I might even charge another pad with just shellac, because I obviously started with a mixture of a lot of alcohol. But this, as I add more shellac, will work as well. I think somebody hammering something upstairs. Sounds like with a vengeance.
Who's your neighbor again?
They are a home furnishings manufacturer. They make you know, drapes and blinds and stuff like that. You know, very expensive stuff.
Suppose somebody's got to.
Yeah, for the rest of us who just get our blinds at Home
Walmart.
Depot and Walmart.
Yeah.
Walmart people.
So you can see, if I'll show you this, you can see that the initial gambit of this is a little bit, let's see if I can get it down this way, is a little discouraging. Because you can still see that the texture of the top is, you
All
know,
dippy.
to take shellac is still very rough to the eye. All I'm doing is finish on as I can, trying to get, you know, as much shellac in place as I can. I'm not worried about trying to make everything look shiny and lovely yet. Right now, it's a building process. So that's just to give you an idea of what the surface looks like up close and personal.
So this requires a little faith, is what you're saying. If you start out and you're like, oh my God, this is never going to look good. Keep going.
This time, it can be a little discerning, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but at this point, I'm starting to get a build. You can, you know, you might be starting this and get to this point and go, oh my God, what did I get myself into? It's going to look worse before it looks better, usually.
How's your shoulder doing?
Quick polishing never really bothered me that much.
Really?
Yeah, I don't find it, you know, because most of it's at the elbow anyway, you know.
But it does make you sweat.
Plus, it does, probably the only exercise I get. So there's that too.
You ever find yourself doing this like you ever catch yourself washing the dishes and you realize you're using your French polishing motion and maybe
Oh, sure, yeah. So I'm going to charge a second pad heavy. Oh, there we go. Heavy on the shellac, less alcohol. Because I think that pad is quite heavy alcohol laden. I want to start getting a firmer build.
Sharon, we've had a request for you to talk some smack about Doug while he's doing this.
Oh, really?
That's what Robin wants. I don't know. I'm just telling you what Robin wants.
Well, I was gonna say that you guys think Doug does dishes. He does not.
Oh, oh.
Yeah, and Sharon.
So I got a pretty heavily charged pad with shellac. Much less in the way of alcohol. Oh yeah. And if you're dealing with a really wet pad like I am now, the whole idea is to get on and off an area pretty quick. I don't want to spend too much time here because I don't want to gum up and get stuck. I don't want to lift any of the finish that's around, especially that flake finish. I just want to keep piling on.
Are you still working off of that initial blast of oil that you used?
Yeah, I will add, I'll try to do it in camera. I will
Okay.
add about that much oil
Okay.
every few times I charge this. 'Cause
Okay.
at this point, it's just acting as a lubricant. Since it's not a drying oil, it's just helping me glide over the top of the finish.
Some people might be like, well, if a little bit of oil is awesome, why not add a lot of oil? Is there a downside to a lot of oil?
That's the point Brian had brought up with me at some point, that after last time that he had mentioned to me that I didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about the fact that you don't really use a lot of oil.
Uh-huh.
Even when you're using a drying oil. I might use a little more when I'm using a drying oil, trying to get a shine, but that's it.
Uh-huh.
That's what you need, and that'll do a ton in terms of keeping you from sticking, letting you move. I will use maybe a drop or two more if I'm getting heavy on the pumice stone, which I'm about to.
Now, when we started this, you said you don't flash off, which I'm assuming you meant maybe what I hear is spiriting off. I've never really understood spiriting off myself, but is that where the oil kind of raises to the top? Some people will take it off with the alcohol on their pad or something. I guess I don't understand.
Oil can raise to the top also to give the top a heavier shine. They will go back to an already dry finish and spear it off or flash off with a mixture of mostly alcohol in a pad and very little shellac. Some people use just alcohol. And I don't really do that much because I find that as I'm getting to my final build, if I have a look that I like, say with the black guitar that we looked at earlier, that if I'm getting to that point where I'm really kind of burnishing and polishing the finish, using pumice stone, using drying oils.
We're using polishing compound too, like.
Yeah, the pumice stone is a polishing compound, and then I
Yeah.
might, at that point, I might get a little bit more alcohol into my mixture by, injecting a little bit more alcohol into the pad to get a little bit more of a dilute solution. And
Doug, can we pause for a second and have you bring the camera down into the area that you have a lot of building to do, just to kind of get an idea of what's happening in there?
you can see that's starting to build.
Yeah.
That's less harsh, and it's starting to get a nice build to it.
Yeah.
At this point of the build, I may actually switch. Hold on, right now I think I'm going to stick with straight shellac. But at this point, I'm going to begin the process of using some pumice stone. And I just use it like a salt shaker. That, and I'll use it just in an area. I'm not going to spread it all over the place. Just going to use it in an area where I want to start with. And that will do a couple of things. That will create slurry. I'll kind of sand everything out, as well as whatever color I'm dealing with, in this case, just a Fortina. It will take the color of whatever I'm putting on. If I were using an amber to get a deeper color on this, which in this case I'm not interested in, but it would take the color of whatever shellac or whatever dyed shellac you're putting on, because you can dye your shellac when you're French polishing.
Doug, is this the infamous guitar from
From
the fingerboard sessions?
last week, kerfuffle, or 2 weeks ago, yeah. This is,
Looks really nice.
this is just the process of you just keep doing what you need to do. Pretty liberal with the pumice stone. And at that point, I might use a little bit more oil because I don't want to get stuck.
Are you still using the same pad, or are you switching between pads for like the pumice stone portion?
No, I'm still using the same pad. I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start using this, which has Sanderac and mastic in it, because I want to start getting a little bit heavier build. So I'm just going to put that into the same pad I'm using and let that kind of become an addition to my mixture of resins that I'm applying.
Yeah, what's your pumice rig there? Salt shaker, and then what's on the top?
This is pumice stone and rotten stone. This is just some muslin, the same I use, the same cloth I make the pads out of.
So the interior of the pad,
Yeah. Not the interior of the pad. This is the outer part of the pad.
outerior of the pad.
When you first start using it, it's good to use a little bit at a time, so you start to get the feel of how much it interrupts your your pad's freedom of movement, so to speak. Down here too. Just
It's the interior of the pad. Cotton and gloves, right?
the interior of the pad is anything you really want to use. You could use cotton, you can use gauze. We use cotton balls. We also have some gauze that we picked up
They
cheap.
mix the cotton and the gloves.
Yeah. You can use, you know, you can pick up pretty cheaply. You can pick up cotton waste and use that as the inside of your bed. That's a little less refined, and it, you know, it's, for my taste, when I pull it out of the bag, it feels much, it doesn't feel as lint-free as the bag suggests. This is just a, you know, a little time consuming, but this is just a process of just continuing to add, finish, and pumice. The sander rack as we switch to that, which is here. Sander rack and pumice stone mixture. Now, oh, here I can show you this too. Just give me a minute. Might be a good idea for some, and I would do it here. If you might want to take off your fingerboard here, so you can see that I'm getting some finish up on the side of the fingerboard that I'm going to have to deal with later. It's not that hard to deal with, but you might want to take off your fingerboard.
Already threaded now.
Yeah, it's an easy cleanup. Since we're actually just using the French polish to repair the old finish and get as much finish on there as we can to build everything up before we start sanding and leveling everything off. The pumice stone is acting as a filler. I will, in my little bucket of pads, I will have little teeny ones that I make solely for the purpose of being able to fill and finish areas that are tight to the fingerboard or around, you know, a bridge or something like that.
Aaron Jones says he's got to run, but thank you very much.
Take it easy, Aaron. I know this is a little bit like watching paint dry. Now here's something interesting, at least.
It's actually like watching paint that never dries.
So the condition of my pad, you can see because of the presence of pumice stone, which is an abrasive, is starting to get poor. So at this point, we're going to want to switch out our pad. You could, if you wish, take out the inner pad, which is still charged full of good shellac, and we don't want to just throw it in the garbage because we're not done yet.
Everybody, your gigantic scissors,
All right, go to the other
comic ones. I'll go get them.
one. Yeah, if you want. So we'll just move it to a new pad. Sharon wants you to see my comic scissors. Here.
Oh, I was holding it in front of the laptop. They're gigantic. I can't use them because I can't open it with my hand. I'm too
That-
weak.
Doug, what are those for?
I use them to cut. I usually you just use them to cut cloth.
Well, what was their original intention? Were those like
I don't know what kind of shears
Got
those
them at
were.
a flea
those are
market.
I
like
don't know on a flea market. They're gigantic.
used in processing lamb chops or something? I don't know what those.
Ugh. But I can't even get them open any farther than this.
So I've moved over to a fresh pad.
Robin thinks they're for cutting off clown ties.
This way we don't have to spend a whole lot of time charging up a new pad, especially if we're not done with our French polishing session. You can just wrap some more shellac. I'll just concentrate on an area until it starts to feel a little sticky.
Ribbon cutting scissors.
Oh, they probably
That's what they look like. Yeah, exactly.
Just don't let those things anywhere near the world's largest ball of twine. Grace, I think it is. That's 4F pumice, Doug, right?
yes.
Have you ever seen any other Fs of pumice? I don't think I have. What?
I'm sure they exist.
Yeah.
I haven't noticed them.
You think there's
Most of the places you would buy it from for the purpose of doing this would probably only be carrying 4F.
think there's a 5F?
I think 4F is the finest.
Is it? Seems like somebody would eventually come out with a 5F. Any words of wisdom around them cavities? Like, you ever accidentally drop your pad down there?
around here.
Well, I'm thinking more of the pickup cavity there.
I probably have,
Mhm.
you know, a very long pair of forceps usually solves that too.
Mhm.
Now I did notice something, it's probably under the pickguard. So I normally wouldn't even necessarily worry about it, but two things. One, you can see that we're starting to get a build that is not making all of this disappear completely, but it's starting to get thicker, you know, and fill in between.
Yeah.
We could, during the course of this, if we chose to, um,
Mark, Doug also has rotten stone, but he uses it for, I don't know that rotten stone would work for what Doug's doing right now.
rotten stone is a finer stone.
Oh, it's
You would
finer.
come across here with a little bit of, 600 or 1,000 grit and try to knock off some of the high spots. You can give it some time to dry if you wanted to. I normally don't. Because I'm just, taking off some high spots to bring that down to where my build is. And you can even see where it's hitting the high spots
Yeah.
here, here. Shellac's dry enough at this point to not be pushed around.
That's pretty crazy because you've put a lot on there. What's your humidity in your shop right now?
Yeah,
46.
how much?
46.
It's nice. It's nice.
46%.
That's a nice humidity. Do you think I've never had an experience where I would have thought I would have been sanding by now? Do you think maybe your sander rack has something to do with that, or?
It could. I've and I'm just kind of kissing the top of it
Yeah.
to just take off some of the high spots as I get this filled. And right off the bat, I can see that, it's going on a little bit smoother. So I might a few times in between as I get the build, because I don't want to, of course, whenever you're filling any kind of finish where you're wiping on
Mhm.
finish uniformly over the surface, if you have, a surface that has a void in it and you put finish on it, you'll put finish on it in that fashion. You'll forever have the cavity unless you knock down what's over here. In the case of this, we have probably more cavities than we do have the areas surrounded, so it would resemble more the peaks of mountains or such. But to just, after I've got a good dry feeling on the finish where I don't feel, it sticky anymore, I don't hesitate to take a little bit of sandpaper on a felt block and just kind of knock off the high spots. It wreaks havoc on the surface of the finish, obviously, but I'm not trying to create a polish at this point as much as I am just trying to get material on. So I might, to move things along a little quicker for my tastes, I might try to knock down some of the high spots. And you can see there all the satiny parts of where it's knocked off the high spots. So I still have some building to go and a fair amount of work to do in terms of adding finish.
I would say not for young, but for people that are just starting out French polishing, you might want to do some test sanding.
Oh yeah.
It takes a fair amount of feel to be able to sand on shellac that you just put on. And if you do it wrong, you can be sad.
You'll have a lot more French polishing on your hands to do than you did before. That's for sure. You know, that's partially the wonderful thing about French polish is you can just correct a lot of your mistakes. Obviously, practicing on a customer's instrument is probably not something that you'd want to do.
Yeah. I've sanded my fair share of wet lacquer too. I'm usually really happy when I'm sanding wet lacquer. It's been some time since I've done it though. Something must be changing. You ever sand wet lacquer, Doug?
Not on purpose.
Just don't like something and you're like, I'm not waiting until tomorrow.
Only out of frustration. When things
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, nobody sands wet lacquer because they want to.
Now you can see here where that build is getting much
Yeah.
thicker, you know. So it's just a process of time, and the more pumice you use in between adding finish, you know, and occasionally if you want to drop a little paper on there,
Mm-hmm.
the build will go quicker.
Do you want to stop on this one and go to the next example, or do you have another example?
Oh yeah, we've got more, sure. Let me get some finish.
I think if we
I just dusted everything.
no, you got to leave it like that. That's exactly.
So this, what I guess would do
Bye,
is,
Grace.
as I finish this, as I get this closer to being done, I can post pictures of it in Instagram,
Yeah.
you know, and show the process of it being better. This top probably would take a couple of hours to get it to the point where it starts looking like it wasn't damaged. But you can see there where that's starting to get a decent build on it. And over time we get flatter and flatter and flatter, you know, kind of thing. I don't know if you can see it from there. There. Like I said, right now it's not going to start looking good for at least another couple of hours. But as that builds, it'll start looking, you know, like a freshly finished lacquer guitar.
So is this how you would normally approach this? You wouldn't hose this down with lacquer, you think?
No, because all of that flaking, outside of the fact that all of that flaking that was going on, if I just hose it down with lacquer or cello salt or something like that, it was just going to get all curly on me. This is going to take me a lot less time. I won't have to sand down the finish as much as
Could you, if you wanted, like at this point, like if you wanted to finish it off by hosing it down with lacquer, do you think it would accept lacquer at this point?
you can lacquer. Shellac will take any kind of finish over the top of it. You can lacquer over shellac anytime you want. You know, and you could certainly do that. I think Eastman, when they were, they may still be, but when they were first doing those kind of old-timey looking guitars, those were quote unquote a hand rubbed finish that basically was a shellac finish, hand rubbed on, and then like one coat of lacquer over the top of it, hit the buffing wheel, and then it was done. So it made made for delicate work whenever you wanted to work on the guitar, and if you made a mistake of using tape anywhere near it, I've done that and regretted it. At this point, I've switched to using a drying oil to help build the finish. And you can even see right away that it's starting to get flatter and flatter. I don't know if that's, you see that there's a build to the finish. Like I said, over time of a couple of hours, it'll be done. And then it'll also be finished, meaning like I don't have to wait for it to dry. I don't have to wait for it to gas off. I don't have to level sand. I don't have to put on a top coat. I'll just be finished, and I can keep it looking like an old guitar rather than a guitar that has fresh finish plowed over the top of it. That's my most of the time my hesitancy for spraying is on an old guitar like this, because I'll have a guitar that when I'm done will look like a guitar that has finish sprayed on it rather than a flat finish that just has a good shine to it. And that's,
it is very challenging to make lacquer look halfway decent in a situation like this.
But that's starting to get a build to it, so it's nice and
Yeah,
starting to be thick. And you can see how it's I don't know if it's a way to see the texture, but you can see that it's starting to get thick enough that if I let it sit and maybe do a quick sanding, use a little bit more pumice stone, it starts leveling itself out as you go to the point where you get a nice flat finish. You can see here a little cavity that I haven't been paying much attention to. You can see down here, I haven't spent a whole lot of time down here. I've been concentrating on the worst areas, which were the shoulders. So now I might spend more of my time in here and in here to get that to build. This actually, where this was all checked and everything, where this was all checked in here, you can see the checks remain, but it's got a nice, a nice film over it of resin of finish. And that, as you buff up, it'll look like a good old aged, sheen. So it's this one you wanted to see it because we had looked at it the last time. That is never going to be able to get finished in the time we have. But that's why we do that one.
no, but I think we get the idea, and I can see where this is going. It's gonna be a good result.
Yeah, and what I can do is I can take either some pictures or some video as it gets completed. I'll post it on Instagram, or I'll send them to you and you can post it on the Patreon.
That sounds good.
So this way we can kind of have a follow-up of where it is. So let's look at
I lost my chat. Where'd my chat go? There we go. Brian says if you're gonna hose it down with lacquer after this, he'd hit it with some naphtha to get the oils off, which is a good move. I'd probably even wait a couple days for all the oils to come wandering out. Just make sure you're done with oil
True.
coming off of it.
Yeah, I would do that. Like I said, my instinct would be to just spend more time polishing it.
You don't look like you mind doing that.
I don't
Not gonna
mind doing it at all. It's not hard. It's not really hard on my arms.
Mhm.
I built it into the estimate of spending about 4 hours French polishing.
Mhm.
So, and that's probably about what it will take.
What do we got here? Looks like a 0018 of sorts.
And it's an old 0018. It's in for a whole bunch of repairs, some bridge work. It's got a crack here. Gonna get some fret work. It had some brace work done already. I think a bridge plate is done already.
Mhm.
The customer asked me about this. This has had a number of repairs. Let me get to that. Has had a number of repairs in the past that some were done pretty well. Others, the customer was fairly regretful about. This one being one of them, is a crack that is not poorly repaired, It's got some nice cleats on the inside. They're glued in place. The crack is shut. It's still closed. Trying to open it up at this point would probably be not worth the trouble. But they said it just looks terrible to them, and they can feel it. And it's constantly snagging on a sweater and what have you. So they asked me if something could be done about that. There was another repair that's not as bad on the side here. It looks like there was a crack, or a piece of the binding came away or took some of the thing. It's a little dark. You can see that there. But there's some kind of finish over it. I suspect lacquer. So here is a perfect example of where I would, rather than the guitar's got, if you turn on the light, you can see the guitar has a number of issues with the finish already on the back of a worn guitar. I don't want to dress up the guitar too much. I certainly don't want to try to get into all sorts of touch up with this where I have to spray stuff on it. It looks like, to me, that there's certainly some kind of finish on it over here that somebody used to, let me pull back a little bit further. Finish on it over here that somebody who had done this repair over here, which he said it wasn't a bad repair at all. It may have been the same person as this, but they're having difficulty with this because this is bothering them. And they say they're a little bit regretful of having had it done by whoever they had it done by. But it was some time ago, and they never liked the result. So while it was here for all of the stuff we're doing, of course, can you do anything about that too? I said, yeah, sure, we'll see if we can make that better. So here's another perfect example of where I would use some French polishing to make my life a little bit easier. This, like I said, doesn't have to be re-repaired. I've flooded the crack with naphtha to see if it's bleeding through. It is not. So now it's just basically a job of making the outside of the guitar look a little better. So I will take razor blade, scraper.
I'm not sure I heard. Do you have a tectonic plate there, or what's the razor blade doing? You're just kind of bringing it down?
I was bringing it down. There was a little bit of a lip, where one side was a little bit higher than the other. So I'm bringing that down, scraping right through it. Razor blade with an edge on it. Incidentally, if you have any dental tools with this fancy stuff on it, those are wonderful for drawing an edge on your razor blade to give it a hook. So now, a lot of the touch-up, or the attempted touch-up before is coming off. There are parts of it you can see that I'm coming through to raw wood.
Doug, any idea what that dark stuff was? Was that just dye that went wrong on the previous repair guy, or
I think it was just dye that somebody was trying to.
they're like, oh, brown. I got a
Yeah.
bottle that says brown on
Yeah, and it's Klondike brown or something like that.
it. Yeah. How about that?
There we go.
A lot of variation in the color brown, as it turns out.
So here, I might take a little bit of sandpaper, 400 grit in this case, a little foam block, and give myself just to braid the area to see what I'm in for. I want to get it level to the touch. I'm not worried about what I'm doing to the finish because I know I'm going to be doing some touch-up. And I'll be doing some touch-up. We can even see the areas of finish that were added on, you know, that are coming to the, that are grading themselves more than the surrounding finish. I won't necessarily try to get all the way down to raw wood. I just want to make this lush, which it mostly is. I can feel a little bit proud at the end there. So then I might come so now.
We have a request from Dan Earlywine to see the razor blade. You got you the tape on there?
Yeah, I used one with the tape. This is the one without the tape that I was just using.
Mhm.
Just center razor blade with a hook on the top of it facing that way.
You ground a hook into it?
Yep. That's what I mentioned. Let me grab a fresh blade.
While Doug's gone, I'll throw in a little thing I do, which is to give the blade just a little bit of a bend.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is as if I were turning a hook on a scraper.
Mhm.
I take a dental tool that has these roundish, I don't know if these are decorative or so that the dentist can feel cool. I presume that's what they were for. It seems like a lot of work just to make them fancy. But they're perfect for taking a razor blade, one swipe, and now I've got a significant hook on the thing. So if I've given you some dental tools,
They gave me a whole pile of them.
yeah, so you have.
I've already started modifying those little chisel ones he sent me. Those things are fantastic. I put a decent edge on one the other day and was because I've completely obliterated my micro chisel set.
Oh, cool. So after a bit of 400. Back with a medium-sized pan. Give myself a shot of alcohol, charge it, make it a little wet.
Dan's curious if you've ever thought about doing your own dental work too.
There are times in my life that I wanted to say the state, sure.
I was telling somebody I'm getting to that age where going to the dentist feels like I'm buying tires for a car I'm about to sell.
Shellac. Shellac.
Dan also says he loves this. Chris is taking off. He says thank you.
Who's taking off?
Chris.
Take care, Chris.
So what are you gonna charge Aaron for that crosscut and crack?
I'll take
Like-
it out in labor.
Like,
He'll
I'd say-
definitely take it out in labor. Don't worry about it.
are you the one doing the dishes now?
Sure. I try to bring them treats, but they refuse to eat sugar now.
Oh, that's good.
Really well charged pan.
Bring him a zucchini.
I'm gonna put a little bit of shellac on it. I'll head it out, and then I'm just gonna see where I stand. Now, I can see what I can look at. I'm a little brown on the outer side, so I might choose to take that down a little bit to make it look a little bit better.
That already looks like 100 times better. Put you some brown on there. You should be golden.
So I pull the paper a little bit. I might need something a little bit more aggressive than that. Get rid of
I got to remember to do that. Putting your finger down and pulling the paper with the finger. You ever use objects other than your finger for doing that?
Yeah, you can. I just normally use my finger. This is my favorite scraper on the planet. Because even on a flat surface, I can direct exactly where I need it. And so then I'll look to see where this leaves me with a little bit of finish on there. So that's not looking terrible. That looks a little bit less objectionable. And here's where the fun comes in. Because they're over there. These here, these pens that we were talking about earlier. Well,
These are the brush tips.
these are the brush tips. So here I can pick a brown that I think will do the trick.
Yeah, Robin's noting that you just pulled out like something that looked like half of Michael's there.
Yes.
What, this?
Yeah, your pen caddy looked like somebody there a B&E on Michael's.
Yeah.
That's more stock than Michael currently is carrying.
Which brown did you decide on?
The first one I pulled out, which looked reasonable, was burnt sienna. It might be a little bit lighter than I actually need. And we might actually wind up doing a smorgasbord of different dots and dashes of different colors. But if I get that a little bit of darker in there, then I come back to my pad. Now you can also see that there's a lot of dirt and probably even some color from the previous repair that has already come off on my pad when I was putting down the initial shellac. So, you know, I didn't even bother cleaning the back of the guitar before I did it because I just want to get to getting the repair a little darker. The only thing I hate about these pens is that whoever designed them wasn't thinking straight. and Robin will vouch for me on this. It's a nice pen, but there's nowhere to put the cap. Most pens you can get the cap on the other end, so this winds up lost, floating around. So you gotta-
That's clearly planned obsolescence right there. I'm sorry, but they want your pens drying out, so you buy more.
They're trying to get you to dump more money into big cap.
Big cap.
So here I'm using a little bit of an oak color. Blend in a little bit.
That's looking very nice.
Then I'll grab my pad.
Are you adding any pumice to this yet, or is this still pumice free?
Pumice act as an abrasive and kind of pull the color off while you're wiping it on. Here, I'm just give it a quick pat over here to make sure I have a dry enough pad. I might even wipe finish on the areas next to it and then over it. I don't want to put too much on. I'm just trying to do what I said before, lock in the color. I don't want it to lighten too much. I don't want to pull any off. And then I might hunt for a different brown. That's the burnt sienna that I liked. And I don't have any rhyme or reason of this. I'll just grab a handful of them and start like I'm dealing a deck of cards. Start to see what I think would wind up being where I want to be. You know, this warm brown walnut, perfect brown. Is there such a thing? Light oak.
So in Mohawk nomenclature, perfect brown, and I feel like they aren't completely accurate, at least in the perfect browns that I know, but they seem to think a brown so neutral that you don't register a secondary color. But I always feel like perfect brown has just a little bit of red in it, a little more red than a true neutral brown would have.
Yeah, and here I'm thinking I'm trying to get, you know, the streaks of different color here to work for me.
The most neutral brown I've ever seen is the StuMac color tone pigment brown. Like that stuff is just brown.
And you can fill in little stuff around neighborhood.
Does that pen smell like shellac? I forgot to ask. Is that a shellac based binder in that?
Ask me that again?
I can't remember if I asked you the first time. Did I ask you that? I think I asked you about the little fine point pens.
To me, it's just, I think it's an ink. I don't know what solvent is in there.
Huh. Because there's the crazy, the touch-up, maybe they're called touch-up pens, but those have those ones where the felt actually, you charge it by sticking it into the pen and then it springs back up and then
Yeah, those
gets,
are like lacquer pens, aren't they?
they are, but I don't think they don't smell like they got lacquer on them. They smell like they're like some kind of like Qualisol business or something. I don't know. That's looking really good, Doug.
So then I'm gonna get a little bit more shellac over the top of that so I don't lose what I have. I don't want to take any off. To my eyes, depending on where I'm looking at it, I need a little bit darker. I might start adding some stuff here and there for.
Well, I don't know if it's my bandwidth or what, but that looks pretty good.
From here. And so, you know, you can see that it's a pretty quick repair. And I never had to fire up the compressor.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Not only that, but it's nice for the previous guy to have swung and missed so hard. Like, not to say that what you did isn't good, but boy, it sure helps. Sure helps when the previous guy gave you
Yeah, and it's possible to obsess over this to the point where you're spending too much time on it. You know,
Wouldn't know anything about that. What I like to do is imagine an imaginary luthier that's much better than me, and then compete against that guy.
Yeah, there you go. So here you can see that this is shaping up pretty quick.
So is your area of effect on this repair, you're not going to go back over this with lacquer, is that correct?
No, I'm not. What I might do in a case like this is,
If you were, how's the witness line situation on repairs like this? I found I had pretty good luck, unless it was like crazy, some of that old crazy Gibson lacquer that just like new lacquer won't even bite into. Like I had pretty decent luck with layer lines. Do you find any issues with layer lines on shellac repairs on lacquer?
generally speaking, not unless you're laying it on super thick.
Yeah.
You have a real serious buildup of lacquer in this area. That, let me pull back. If you have a kind of a serious build of lacquer in this area that's much thicker than the surrounding finish, it'll obviously stand proud. You know, generally speaking, in a job like this, I'll now just go and kind of give the back a little bit of a
A little bit of, yeah.
freshen up, you know, so that I come off. I don't want to spend too much time here. We're gonna watch what happens if I spend too much time here. If I spend too much time there, this will happen.
Oh, Doug.
Well, this is all part of learning, isn't it? So now, if you spend too much time on that before it's good, well, and sealed, or if you're using too hot a pad, you're gonna have to go back and do that work again and begin the process of.
Any sense of time before you can really lean into it, or?
Well, what I've found is just like when you're spraying, to cover up a finish, you know, if you're covering up a touch-up with lacquer, if you're doing like your shellac thing where you're painting in stuff and then you're misting over it to seal it, and I'll even use a pad just like I did if I got too heavy at a certain spot. I'll use to pull off some of the what I just put on. But when you're spraying clear to lock in your color, very often you give it that pss, pss, just a mist, just to lock it in. That to me, what's happening when I do this. I'm just getting a little bit of a cover over it so that I can add more color and lock it in. Then once I've got where I am, it's a matter of continuing to add tiny bits of finish on top that are not.
Now I kind of want to mess around with that Jerry Lynn thing of airbrushing shellac on.
You can do that. I have found that doing this, if I'm just, just wiping it on as I'm adding color. Something lighter.
It's probably throwing your color over into some different layers too. Like I find that
You get a little bit of like build through, like a little bit of diffusion from layer on top of layer. So you're diffusing the eye a little bit more. But what I found is, and I have, when I've had, when I've got the time to, I'll spray over the top of it, but if I'm French polishing to do this, I'll just get a little bit of finish on there, move on with my color, get a little bit more on, let build in. I also have found that if I'm using shellac with sanderac in it, sanderac is a little bit more resilient to my upper layers of
Mm-hmm.
shellac. They won't penetrate as much. And if I'm thinking hard enough about it, I'll switch. If I start to use a little bit of a drying oil, like my walnut, that'll polymerize and harden and kind of seal everything in. So I don't make the mistake of burning off what I've just put on, and getting where we are there, which you can see we're getting a lot closer to being.
That looks really nice.
Yeah. So that's getting closer to being what I would want. I might try a little yellow in there because I don't want it to look too red.
Yeah.
Pull it back a little bit.
Cool. What do you think? We're coming up on 3 hours. Do you wanna give me a shoulder break?
If you wanna put a pin in it there, that's fine. I mean, the other repairs that you would use shellac for in a French polishing, sides of a neck after a refret.
Yeah.
Instead of wiping on lacquer, that to me depends on the guitar. Half of the time I'll either do lacquer or sometimes I'll even if it's just on the edges of the binding or the edges of an unbound neck where it doesn't invade the neck part. Sometimes I'll just use CA,
Yeah.
and then just push that on with Q-tip.
Yeah, I like the CA on that because you got that nice line between the fingerboard and the neck where you'll never detect a layer line anyway. So
yeah, if you have a case where like the neck of this guitar, there's a lot going on here. I would sand this down and French polish all of this to get a nice blend in.
Yeah.
As the neck, and try to freshen up the back here, which is exactly what we're going to do with that one. So that's another area. If this one,
We've been fielding questions.
If you have a crack in a guitar top, doing a fill with CA, scraping that flush,
Yeah.
polishing over the top of it after a little bit of sanding, saves you from that nightmare of trying to the level sand and then buff out, and you have all sorts of ripples in the finish. Or if you have a bridge lift that wound up in a chip, you fill that with a little bit of CA. After you've scraped and sanded it flush, you can French polish over this entire area or the entire top and come up with a great result. So that's I had all of those kind of planned to show. I know we're running only along the tooth.
It's all right.
If you want to put a pin in it there, we can do that.
Why don't we do that? And do you think you have enough for a fourth one, or do you want to try to?
We can do a fourth one if you want.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, because like I said, the whole thing here is just being able to show, how useful the technique is in just everyday repairs. It's not just a matter of putting a finish on a guitar, like, in this Martin here.
Yeah.
That's blending in nicely, and we'll have an inconspicuous repair, and you'll have a back that, is going to wind up with a nice finish on it. You could dress this down and make it a little bit more satiny, as we looked at with rotten stone and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I always wondered why they call it French polish when it really should be French application, because you wind up applying a lot with it. But Dan, do you have any questions?
This Dan?
That Dan?
I just love it. No, let's have number 4.
All right. Well, Doug, let's talk about a fourth one. I'm still a little ways away from Fountain City's diabolical plans for my next one, so we might do well to do a fourth one.
You want to do a fourth one at the end of July?
Let's look at it. Let's talk about what you got left, and maybe we do. If you don't have like a full one, then we can do like what you have left, and then we can do some take some questions from some callers.
Yeah, sure.
So,
Hey,
that was
Ian,
what
are
did
the other ones up on Patreon to look back to already?
Yes, all of the previous Dinkings, as far as I know, are up right now.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, there's some good ones in there too. Doug's got some good ones. I got some good ones on color theory. If you want to go back and watch any of those. All right. So, Doug, everybody that's still here, can you come in and give Doug a virtual hug?
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
Give me
And,
some sugar.
Thanks,
For
Doug.
saving me from my mishaps.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
Oh, my pleasure.
all right, and for people that want to,
Thank you, Ian.
yeah, you're welcome. For people that want to continue this, the Luth Along after I shut this down will be in full effect. So just pop back on a Luth Along. You can talk about this. I'm gonna go eat some dinner.
Have a good one,
Thanks
guys.
for all you-
Enjoy your dinner, Ian.
Thanks
All
again,
the
Doug.
Patreonites.
Take care.
Thanks to all the Patreonites. That's wonderful.
Take care, everyone.